Hello there. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, which is free to download and free to use, is sponsored by Diversus Health Mental Health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts. 719-247-1313. You can call or text in those thoughts that way, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at Gingerly Tweets. Lot to cover, including the Rockies World Series, or the closest feeling they're going to have to winning a World Series. But I got to start with the news that broke this afternoon regarding the Colorado Avalanche. And what the Avalanche have now done is gotten the most important piece of offseason business done before the offseason even begins. Brock Nelson is staying with the Avs on a 3-year deal that is going to average out to $7.5 million a year. They absolutely had to get this done. The jury is still out on whether they made the right decision to trade Mikko Rantanen. And as I talked about yesterday on the show, I don't know that anybody involved in either Mikko Rantanen trade looks like a winner right now. But the only way that the Avalanche and Chris McFarland can be proven right is if they ran back the team we saw in Game 7 against the Stars. Give that team a full season. And then we'll ultimately decide whether they made the right move. To lose Brock Nelson would have been bordering on catastrophic, because now you're entering the free agent market looking for a player that plays a premium position. Brock Nelson would probably be second in the pecking order behind Sam Bennett of the Florida Panthers, which would mean his price would only go up if he were to hit the open market. Because, as they say, only takes one. Only takes one team with more cap space than the Avs to look at Brock Nelson and say, he's exactly what we need, get the Avs outbid, and then they're back on the carousel that they were when they let Nazem Kadri go. JT Compher, Ryan Johansson, Casey Mittelstadt. They could not afford to not re-sign Brock Nelson. And they probably had to do it before he hit the open market. And you look at the AAV, $7.5 million a year. That's not cheap. They didn't get a bargain price on Brock Nelson. And you may look at, for instance, what Nazem Kadri is making right now from the Calgary Flames, and you will notice that he's making $7 million a year. And you may connect those dots and go, we're signing Brock Nelson for $7.5 million when we could have had Nazem Kadri. Yes, they are. And consider the extra $500K some kind of a tax on making mistake after mistake after mistake when it comes to that position. And I understand the rationale behind letting Nazem Kadri go. I did not slam my fists onto the table that they didn't re-sign Nazem Kadri. They took that money and they signed multiple players to longer-term deals. They chose multiple players over Nazem Kadri. But what they proceeded to do which was the risk that they ran, was to colossally screw up that position. And they did. Comfort didn't work. Johansson really didn't work. Casey Middlestat, I think in the end, the Avalanche are just in a different place, and they could not wait any longer for Casey Middlestat to finally realize his potential. And he's still a young player. And I think he has the chance to be pretty good in Boston. But the Avs, time wasn't on their side. Brock Nelson is clearly the best second-line center they've had, clearly the best center they've had other than Nathan McKinnon since Nazem Kadri. And they had to keep him. They have to, this experiment that they're undertaking, trading a franchise cornerstone piece mid-season in the middle of your championship window, they had to make sure all these guys stay intact. And they found out after letting Nazem Kadri go just how difficult it is. Their reasoning may have been sound after the Stanley Cup run in letting Nazem Kadri go, but the key aspect is you have to get it right after. It's not like you can just go without. And the Avalanche were staring the same reality in the face if they let Brock Nelson hit the open market. That they would have to try and cobble together, move someone out of position. I won't even dare to say bring someone up from the minor leagues, because the most likely candidate for that, they traded for Brock Nelson in Callum Ritchie. And even he would not be ready to take on that role. So the Avs, this was never a rental player in Brock Nelson. I know they acquired him with every intention of signing him. But you had to sign him given what you gave up and given the move made before that set all of this in motion. Because if Brock Nelson leaves, you have that glaring hole in your top six. Now all of a sudden, the Mikko Rantanen trade doesn't make as much sense, because now it's essentially a fourth line center and Marty Necas. That's not better than Mikko Rantanen. Then why did you trade Casey Middlestat for Charlie Coyle? Because Charlie Coyle can't play that position. All of this stuff that the Avalanche did last season are all intertwined. And it's like a Jenga tower. You remove one, then everything else falls down, and you're questioning all these other moves. So they had to get this done. To their credit, they got this done. And now you look at the Avs. Their top six is settled. They have a top six with all six players being there. There's no squinting and tilting your head, and maybe you could see all these guys are top six caliber players. Lehkonen, McKinnon, Necas, Landeskog, Nelson, and Nichushkin. They're all NHL quality top six guys. Nobody is playing above their head here. All of them have produced on big stages in their careers. Most of those players have won a Stanley Cup. Because that's the other part with this second line center stuff. It's not just that they haven't had a second line center since Nazem Kadri walked away. They've also been dealing with the uncertainty surrounding Gabriel Landeskog. So there's been two holes in their top six, which can't happen. I mean, we could talk about depth, and I'm about sick of depth with the NBA talk and the Avs wanting to be deeper. But I get it. Depth is important. But look at the two teams that will take the ice tonight in the game one of the Stanley Cup final. Florida has Kachuk, they have Bennett, they have Barkov, they have Reinhardt, they have Verhaeghe, and they could easily have Brad Marchand in their top 6. They don't, which speaks to their depth, but Brad Marchand is a top 6 player. They don't have questions in their top 6. Edmonton has some bigger questions, but when you have basically, if you were ranking the best players in the NHL, you would go Edmonton Oiler 1, Colorado Avalanche, Nathan MacKinnon 2, and maybe Leon Draisaitl 3. So the fact that you have arguably 2 of the top 3 players on planet Earth in your top 6 kind of makes up for a little bit. But even then, you have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who at times has been Edmonton's most important player during this Stanley Cup run. You have Evander Kane. Like, Edmonton does not have a weak top 6 either. Florida has the better top 6, no doubt about it, when you take in all 6 players. But my point is, depth is always the next level, right? To be in the conversation of a championship contender, whether it's the NHL or the NBA or the NFL, you got to get your most important players, your most important positions right first, or else the depth isn't going to get you anywhere. And the Avalanche now, on paper, have their best top 6 since they hoisted the Stanley Cup. There are no lingering questions. There will always be the one if Marty Necas can ever be Mikko Rantanen, and he may never be Mikko Rantanen. But he's a legit top 6 forward. Okay, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, McKinnon, you know their story. Now, the answers that you got from Gabriel Landeskog when he returned, and what you saw from that line of Nichushkin, Landeskog, and Nelson, the production wasn't there in the Dallas series, but you look at the underlying numbers, the amount of chances they created, how they controlled the puck, you could argue that that line was the most effective line the Avalanche had in the Stars series. Again, Nathan MacKinnon probably scored more goals, but you saw signs that this could be potentially one of the best second lines and by extension, one of the best top 6s in the NHL. And now you get him for a whole season. But along with that comes expectation. None of this is new anymore. Okay, the guys had their test run, their warm-up, whatever you want to call last season. Now it's time to go. Now they're all familiar with one another. They'll all have a training camp. Gabriel Landeskog's going to be in there with the team. Brock Nelson, Marty Necas, all these guys are going to be there. Valeri Nichushkin now even. No player assistance program. They're all there. They fixed the goalie room. You have the best defenseman on planet Earth. You have arguably the best depth down the middle. When you look at the 4 centers that the Avalanche have, there is no excuse if we're sitting here 1 year from today and talking about the Avs not playing in the series that begins tonight. I don't know how much, grace you extended the Avs, how disappointed you were. Was it a failure? All that kind of stuff. But we should all be on the same page going into this year with the goalie room they have, with all the moves they made, with the fact that all these guys are going to be available to them right out of the chute. Tell me why the Avalanche shouldn't be expected to come out of the West next year. Whether Edmonton wins the Stanley Cup or not. Tell me why. Tell me what they're missing. Tell me why they can't. They got Landeskog back. They signed Brock Nelson. This team doesn't have any excuses. Now, health is health, and I hate to always throw in that caveat. You know that caveat's in there. But if this team is healthy, there's none of this extra stuff going on. They have a legit second-line center. Gabriel Landeskog is back and healthy. Valeri Nichushkin is on the right path, or whatever you want to say about him. They should be representing the Western Conference next year in the Stanley Cup final. And if they don't, that would be a failure. And then where would you turn? If you were Chris McFarland, if you're the Colorado Avalanche. I don't know where you go from here if this doesn't work. This is exactly what you were betting on. This is exactly what your vision was when you traded Mikko Rantanen. It has to work next year. It has to. But in the meantime, kudos to Chris McFarland for getting it done. There was some rumor out there, some rumors and innuendo that maybe Brock Nelson wasn't going to sign. He signed. And they got it done before anyone else could get their hands on Brock Nelson. So well done to the Avs. But now it's go time. Get to the Stanley Cup final. Be there this time next year to try and keep the Florida Panthers from three-peating. Oops, I just gave away another segment of the show today. 719-247-1313, your reaction to the Avs signing Brock Nelson. 3 years, $7.5 million a year. A premium price, but he is playing a premium position. Enough cobbling it together, enough internal improvement from this player or that player. And now their top six is intact. And it's Stanley Cup final or bust in 2025, 2026. Just getting going on this Wednesday edition of the show. Coming up next. Better soak it in now, Rockies fans, because you won't feel this way for long. What in the heck? It's a family show after all. Is going on with your Colorado Rockies? Today, if you did not hear, did not see, this is what happened.
2-2. And it should be an easy play for McMahon. It is.
Yes.
The Rockies win it 3-2. They have swept the Marlins in Miami for the first time since 2006. Kinley with his second save of the year. The last time the Rockies had a sweep on the road was last May in San Diego.
Rockies television on the call in front of almost 7,000 fans. 7,000, almost 7,000 hearty souls that took time out of their day to stop by Marlins Park and watch the series finale between two of the biggest jokes in all of Major League Baseball. The Colorado Rockies not only won a series for the first time since last season, September of last season, they swept a series, which Drew Goodman filled you in on the significance of that and how long it's been. And now they've won 3 games in a row for the first time since mid-September of last year. This is the Rockies World Series. This year's version. This is about as good as they are going to feel at any point. Because it will soon be back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Thank you to the Marlins. A sincere thank you to the Miami Marlins, because the Rockies quite literally probably could not do this against any other team except you. I mean, I can't even imagine what the dozens of people leaving the ballpark today were thinking. Just this past weekend, I heard New York fans yelling at each other and the Mets fans puffing out their chests and asserting their dominance over the Yankees because the Mets swept the Rockies and the Yankees didn't. If the Marlins actually had fans, I would feel terrible for them. But all of a sudden, the Colorado Rockies are invincible. And Hunter Goodman is Babe Ruth, apparently. Although Babe Ruth could not get a triple. Hunter Goodman hit 2 home runs in Game 1 of the series. He hit what proved to be the game-winning home run last night in the Rockies win, giving them their first series victory in forever. And today, in the first inning, he had an RBI triple that got the Rockies on the board. Kyle Freeland got his first win of the season. Like, the amount of firsts that occurred today, first since or first of the season, they're almost too numerous to mention. And I have to keep going back to, it's not irony, it's actually quite fitting that the Rockies were able to do this or accomplish this in front of a 3-day crowd. If you combined the 3-day crowd that Marlins Park got, or whatever the heck it's called these days, you would probably still not even get to a sellout. You wouldn't even get to a normal Rockies Friday night crowd. So they have their greatest success of the season, and I'm calling it now. This is their greatest success of the season. Sweeping another supposedly Major League Baseball team, but fitting that it will be in front of the smallest crowds that they will play in front of all year. And they're actually ruining everything, by the way. And look, good for the players. Good for the players, right? I mean, this is like a real life version of the movie Major League. Right? The villain is the owner. The villain is not the manager. It's not the players. They are in their own way lovable. Kyle Freeland, being the Colorado guy, is getting teary-eyed when talking about how bad things are getting. Like, the Rockies players, good for them. They're going out there every day and performing to the absolute best of their ability. The fact of the matter is they're just not that good. But they are trying their hardest out there, and it's got to be just depressing to be in a Rockies clubhouse this year. Every day, day in and day out, knowing that you have almost a 0% chance of winning. And in most games, you're going to get your teeth kicked in and showing up every single day and trying to win. So I honestly mean this. I'm being sincere. I've been told that even when I'm being sincere, I sound very sarcastic. So I'll preface it by saying I'm being sincere. Good for the players. Good for them. I hope that they enjoy these 3 days the most they possibly can. But I don't know that the general sentiment of anybody that has any interest in the Colorado Rockies wants them to do anything other than continue to lose. It's better for content for people like me if they continue to be historically bad. Hardcore fans who are tired of throwing their money, hard-earned money, at that club year in and year out, I think believe that the only way that any change is going to happen is if the Rockies are historically bad. So it's a really tough dynamic. It's a really tough dynamic because the players are trying, and in some ways you feel for the players and you're happy when they have success. But let's be real. We want the Rockies to keep losing. That's what we want on the outside. So as good as things must feel in the clubhouse, and as much as we're all kind of grinning and cracking jokes about breaking up this team and they're unstoppable, and watch them now go on a 35-game winning streak and all this kind of stuff. We can joke about all we want. We really want them to keep losing. Because the last 2 years, they haven't been historically bad. Historically for the Rockies, right? Because they hadn't had 100-loss seasons. But if they somehow extricate themselves from a conversation of the worst baseball teams ever assembled, I don't think that's the best outcome. But maybe just for this week, just for these 3 days, just for today, the focus can just be on the players and how good it must feel for them to be able, and I don't care if it's the Marlins or the Yankees, being able to be another major league team 3 times in a row. Good for them. Now, if you don't mind, we'd like you to go back to consistently losing at a historic rate. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, continuing our discussion yesterday, if you could bring a player from your favorite team's past into its present, who would you choose? I'll catch you up if you didn't hear yesterday on some of the suggestions, including mine when it comes to the Nuggets, the Rockies, and the Avalanche. Did not talk a lot of Broncos, and I would like to do that. Coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. The 45th U.S. Senior Open is returning to the Broadmoor for a record-tying third time. Get your tickets to see the world's best golfers compete June 26th through the 29th at ussenioropen.com. Thanks in large part to Hunter Goodman. 2 home runs on Monday, one last night that won the Rockies the game, and a triple in the first inning that got the Rockies on the board today as they sweep the Miami Marlins. Albert says, rumor is Hunter Goodman asked for a trade immediately after the game. Rockies are considering an offer of a 2029 first-round pick and some unknown prospects, but the Rockies must continue to pay his salary in 2025 plus $50,000. That's good. I would have gone a different way. I would have said the Rockies plan on letting him walk via free agency. I didn't go the Nolan Arenado route. In my head, I was thinking like so many others, like Trevor Story, like they won't get anything back in return for him. But, yeah, wild stuff. That's baseball. I believe the former manager of the Rockies used to say that a lot. This was a Bud Black series, a team that was 9-50, came up with a 3-game sweep. And it's baseball. Even for the Rockies, sometimes that can happen. Yesterday had a lot of fun with this topic of conversation. If you could bring a player from your favorite team's past and put them on the current iteration of your favorite team, who would it be? Now, yesterday we spent time on 3 of the 4 major teams in Colorado. My choice, just to quickly run through it if you did not hear, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. In many ways, what you see from Steph Curry, you saw from Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Not to the level that Steph is, but the Nuggets, more than anything else, need dead-eye knockdown shooters, and about the best that the Nuggets have ever had is Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Put him with Nikola Jokic, and it would be phenomenal. I said for the Avalanche, timely because of the news of Brock Nelson re-signing, that I would look to solve second-line center once and for all and put Peter Forsberg back on the Colorado Avalanche. I got a lot of pushback. A lot of people said that I should have went with Patrick Waugh because that level of goaltending would make up for a lot of ills that the rest of the Avs might have, that he would be a huge difference maker, and I can see that. But I'm still sticking with mine. And as positive of a development as it is that they have re-signed Brock Nelson, Peter Forsberg, you are not. So I'll stick with Forsberg. And I said for the Rockies, it's just about who you want to see again. That's all it is. There's no one that's going to make a difference. And I said I would love to watch Cargo swing a bat at Coors Field again. And then another one that I said, Dante Bichette, because my family, we were big Dante Bichette fans when we had season tickets. But I would go Cargo. That sweet swing at Coors Field, it was awesome. But Rockies, you can't go wrong. There's so many. Love to see. My son said he'd want Nolan Arenado back. Larry Walker, Todd Helton. Just knowing it's not a specific fit because the Rockies aren't one thing away from being even halfway decent. So just pick your favorite player. Pick a player you liked watching. But now the Broncos. And I'll extend this out to the NFL. I know Colorado Springs in Southern Colorado has a diverse group of NFL fans, and I don't want to leave any of you out. So your favorite NFL team, you want to play along? I'll take it. 719-247-1313. But the Broncos are interesting when it comes to this question because a lot, when I have talked to people about this off air, I have gotten a lot of, well, Shannon Sharp or an Ed McCaffrey or a Rod Smith, right? Demaryius Thomas. Getting Bo Nix that weapon in the passing game that I don't know that he has right now. Terrell Davis was a very popular one, right? Look what he did for John Elway. And the Broncos still looking for the answer in the running back room. News on that front coming up. But I thought, why go to those lengths? Just stick Peyton Manning behind center and call it good. To me, it's not that Terrell Davis or any one of the weapons that John Elway or Peyton Manning had in the passing game would be bad selections, but just give me one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Give me a quarterback that had one of the greatest single seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback with not that much better of a supporting cast when it comes to skill positions than this current Broncos team has. Right? That the Peyton Manning effect where there were these wide receivers, and I'll omit Demaryius Thomas because he proved with far lesser quarterbacks that he could be an elite wide receiver. But look at some of the other guys Peyton Manning was throwing to. It was just his friends. He just brought his friends to the team. And Paul Klee, who's the sports editor at the Denver Gazette, when he would join me on the show, used to talk about this all the time. Like Jokic and Peyton Manning are similar. They both just raise the level of everyone around them to the point that you get a warped sense of reality of what those other players actually are. Right? Peyton Manning got some dudes paid that didn't really deserve to get paid because they weren't going to be nearly as good without Peyton Manning. So, look, Bo Nix, if you believe in Bo Nix, giving him Terrell Davis from his 2,000-yard rushing season, that'd be great. Give him one of the greatest tight ends ever in Shannon Sharp, great. But I'll just simplify it. Because I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl with Bo Nix as your starting quarterback. Like that story has yet to be written. That has yet to be proven. You win a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. And you would add Peyton Manning and upgrade already a roster that is as good as the Broncos have had since they won the Super Bowl. They're ranked in the top 10 of the league in the best, and you look at the balance, the talent they have on the defensive side. They have the best defensive player in all of football. They got pass rushers all over the place. They have one of the better offensive lines. Give me Peyton Manning, and all of a sudden, Courtland Sutton as your number one wide receiver doesn't sound so weird. With Sean Payton, mind you. With Sean Payton. So I get Peyton Manning and Sean Payton. Now I'm really buying in to the production that you can have with Mims and Sutton and Pat Bryant and Devon Vele. Yeah, Peyton Manning could make those guys work. So that's what I would do. I would just put Peyton Manning on this Broncos team. That's a Super Bowl contender. Even with this roster that the Broncos have, They're not a Super Bowl contender. Put a Terrell Davis, a Shannon Sharp. I don't take them when you put Peyton Manning on that team. That's a Super Bowl contender. So that's where I would go. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. But, and again, we can open this up to the entirety of the NFL. And the question that I would have is how many teams in the NFL would the best answer not be a quarterback? Right? Because you would say, oh, well, we'll just go, look at the elite quarterbacks and go from there. And maybe that's true. Would it just be Kansas City? You wouldn't bring a quarterback from their past. Baltimore. I don't think Trent Dilfer's beating out Lamar Jackson. Cincinnati. You don't need to bring back a quarterback. You need to bring back someone on the defensive side. Has to be a defensive player. I take Josh Allen over Jim Kelly. So maybe that's what it is. But is that the list? I was thinking about this. Eagles. What about Randall Cunningham or Donovan McNabb? What about putting Troy Aikman on this iteration of the Dallas Cowboys? As much as I like Brock Purdy, how about just sticking Joe Montana? Or Steve Young? Like, I would say the best answer for most NFL teams would just be the best quarterback from their team's history. Maybe you disagree. Let me know. 719-247-1313. Couple of texts in from the 719. It's probably Al Wilson or 77. Mecklenburg? Okay. You're looking at this roster and you're saying, where's the weakness of this roster? It's in those inside linebacker positions, not sold on Drew Sanders, not sold on, or I guess it would be what, Dre Greenlaw with Al Wilson? Okay. Fortify, probably their weak. Well, I would say wide receiver is their weakest position group. Maybe running back. One of those two. Okay. I could buy that. This one from the 719. Manning was not better than Elway. If you're talking about when they played for the team, Peyton had a noodle arm and won because of great defense. No. Back up a couple years. Back up. Not talking about the way he left the Denver Broncos. I'm talking 2013 Peyton. I'm talking Star Wars numbers. I'm talking one of the greatest single seasons we have ever seen from an NFL quarterback, Peyton Manning. Now, I agree with you. If you had to take him the way he left, then Elway certainly was playing at a higher level than Peyton Manning was as they were going out the door. But Peyton Manning's season that he had in 2013, and I know how that season ultimately ended, but you have a better center now. You don't have to worry about that snap going over Peyton Manning's head. No, 2013 Peyton Manning at his best, which you could argue that was the finest season of Peyton Manning's career. that he was at his best with the Denver Broncos, not for as long as he was with the Colts, but his absolute peak, his best season, it was with Denver. Now, I wouldn't begrudge anyone from just saying John Elway. That's fine. I just got super specific, and I also took into account, as great as John Elway was, you know, he had a little bit of the Josh Allen issue, right? That Josh Allen has had at times, right? Who's he throwing the ball to? Because we could talk about Terrell Davis, but he also had Rod Smith and Shannon Sharp and Ed McCaffrey. And I'm not trying to disparage John Elway at all. Like, John Elway's a fine answer. But I look at this Broncos team and I have major questions still about the wide receiver position. And I say, how can I fix that? With just a Rod Smith or just an Ed McCaffrey? Or I get a guy who routinely throughout the course of his career, a guy that made Austin Collie. People thought Austin Collie was elite. That's how good Peyton Manning was. Well, he did some of that in Denver too. So that's where I would go. But John Elway wouldn't be a bad answer at all. So we'll weave that in throughout the rest of the show. As I said, there are some Broncos items to get to when it comes to upgrading this year's roster. Or I guess that's what we're doing, but with an actual player in the NFL right now. We'll get to that. But coming up next, it took a while, but finally Adam Silver has come to his senses when it comes to the All-Star game, and perhaps we have NBC to thank. Welcome in hour number 2 on this Wednesday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or X. The handle is all the same at XTRA Sports 1300. If you'd like to do a little bit more than just watch or listen, you'd like to participate, by all means, we'd love to have you. Call or text 719-247-1313. In fact, that's what Brad has done, building off of where we left off, talking about which former Bronco you would bring back from the past and put onto this team to get the Broncos back to the promised land. Brad wants to call in and talk about it. And Brad, you are on. Appreciate you calling in. Fire away.
Hey, thanks. Long-time listener.
Thanks.
I say John Elway over any quarterback in history. And, the thing that is not giving him credit enough, and people don't even like talking about it, but his wife said it best when Dan Reeves approached Elway on the podium when John was getting that second trophy. And his wife looked at him and said, "Hey, you don't belong here. Get off the stage." If it wasn't for Dan Reeves, that would have been John Elway's 7th or 8th Super Bowl. After the third season, Reeves didn't want him, and he designed plays to get him injured and to make him look bad, the same way Sean Payton went after Russell Wilson. John Elway was the great Super Bowl in spite of having Dan Reeves as a head coach. He made Dan Reeves a famous coach. It wasn't the other way around.
Mm.
And I think he was not only one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but one of the greatest athletes. When he left the Broncos, he was the third leading rusher in history of Broncos.
Mm.
There's a lot to say about that guy.
Yeah. No, and obviously by putting John Elway on this team, he'd have Sean Payton, and you'd have a little bit more faith in Sean Payton coaching John Elway than Dan Reeves.
I think anybody would be happy to have John Elway step in front of them. But, Dan Reeves in an interview said that he didn't really want the superstar quarterback. He was more interested in having a superstar team, and he admitted in the paper designing plays to get Elway hurt, and they still didn't fire him for 4 seasons.
That's interesting.
And then as soon as he's gone, what happens? In his elder years, bang, bang. And it wasn't just a noodle arm with a good mind. I mean, you got to remember the whirlwind. The guy was a monster in those last couple of years, just like he was in his first couple. Hadn't lost much.
No, it really hadn't. And that was the reason why everybody was so disappointed that he didn't come back, because he was leaving. He was a Super Bowl MVP, and he still had a lot left in the tank, as opposed to, I think you're referring to Peyton Manning in the way that he ended. That's great call, great insight, thinking 3 levels up. Appreciate it, Brad. Call back more often. And that's the great thing about a conversation like this. I look at it more. I'm of course factoring in that now Peyton Manning would be coached by Sean Payton, but I'm looking at it more from what Peyton Manning could do for everybody on the Broncos. And yet there's Brad taking kind of a different tact, because John Elway's not a wrong answer. If anybody came in and said, I bring back John Elway, okay, yeah, that's fine. I have a very specific reason why I pick Peyton Manning, and it has to do with my lack of faith in the Broncos wide receiving core. But I like that. I like the angle that Brad took, where he says, if John Elway had, well, it sounds to me like Brad believes anybody but Dan Reeves as his head coach, John Elway would have accomplished even more than he had. And by the way, I do have John Elway And maybe this sounds hypocritical. I don't think it is. I think I'm explaining it in a very specific way that it makes sense for what exercise we're participating in here. I think John Elway is a greater quarterback than Peyton Manning. But if we're talking for this year, and I can bring the 2013 version of Peyton Manning, that's the best I have seen any Broncos quarterback play in a season, including John Elway. And I want him on this team. But I have John Elway, not to get this conversation conflated with another popular summer conversation on Sports Talk Radio. John Elway's on my Mount Rushmore. He is. So please don't misunderstand me. I am not disparaging John Elway one iota. All I'm saying is I've never seen a player wearing a Broncos uniform play the quarterback position at a higher level in a single season than the way Peyton Manning did in 2013. And I put that guy on this team, but even you put John Elway on this team, yeah, they'd probably be in the mix for a Super Bowl as well. Continue to take your thoughts on that, by the way, 719-247-1313. And if you didn't get in yesterday with your thoughts on who you bring back for the Nuggets, the Avalanche, the Rockies, or a team that isn't based in Colorado that you love very much and have a strong opinion about, I'll take them for sure here at 719-247-1313. Now, let's talk some hoops, shall we? I think it was already pretty obvious, but it has become more obvious over recent years with the success of the Four Nations face-off, with the World Baseball Classic and how great that event was. That ended with Shohei Ohtani striking out his then teammate Mike Trout. If it wasn't already clear, it became abundantly clear that the only format, the only way to have an all-star game, sorry NFL, you can't do this, but every other sport can. Team USA versus the world. That's it. It's an international, I shouldn't say Team USA versus the world, international format, because the Four Nations face-off and the World Baseball Classic were specific countries battling one another. But just the idea that it has to have an international aspect to it, because this idea of beating your chest over being a National League guy or an American League guy or an Eastern Conference guy or a Western Conference guy, that is long gone. People do not care. In fact, that I would say there are more people that just want leagues to be done away with and take the top, like in the NBA, the top 16 teams, forget about what conference they're in. But the mystique of National League, American League, and baseball, that's gone. Everybody plays everybody. We can see all these guys on television. There's no novelty to it. There's no pride with it. And there's certainly no pride from the players when it comes to that stuff. Do you think in the era of free agency, they care what league they're representing? They may care about the team, their club that they're representing. They don't care about what league they're representing. And a bigger motivating factor is representing your country. Why do we all love the Olympics? Because in sport, there's no, in many ways, there's no higher form of sport than international competition. That's what it's all about, right? Our athletes against your athletes. So it's just been made more clear with the success that the audience craves it, that the players get behind it. It just makes all the sense in the world. And last year, Adam Silver dabbled. He kind of dipped his toe in a little bit to the waters. But the execution last year in the All-Star game was so horrendously bad. I mean, the tournament format and including the Rising Stars team, and there was an Old Heads team, and Kevin Hart droning on and on and on. Like, it was just terrible. Terrible. But you had within that, you had the Team World versus Team USA. It was in there. We just didn't get enough of it, and there was too much other crap around it to fully enjoy it. Well, now I suppose we need to give a little bit of a nod to NBC. And here's what I mean by that. Adam Silver was on FS1 this morning and announced that there will be a Team World versus Team USA format for next year's NBA All-Star game. Music to my ears. But while he didn't say he had any edict coming from NBC to do this, the fact that the game will be on NBC at the same time that the Winter Olympics are going on NBC, it seemed to me like there was a correlation, or at least why Adam Silver thought this was the right moment to go all in on this type of format. And if NBC didn't have the rights and this was on ESPN or TNT, I don't know if they would have done this. Maybe they would have, because in the Olympic spirit. But we'll never know. The fact of the matter is, on NBC, on that day, you're going to get Olympic coverage, followed by the NBA All-Star Game, which is Team USA versus the world. And then after that, it will be more Olympics coverage. It's great. It's perfect. Here's the only aspect of this that I worry about. Going back to the way they did it this past year. There is only one good format. It is like they used to do, East versus West, one game, 4 quarters, but make it Team USA versus the world. Do not make it Team Serbia, Team Canada. Don't do that. And I think Adam Silver's contemplating it, because he left himself some wiggle room and said what kind of format we're doing is we haven't decided yet, but it's going to be Team USA versus the world. It needs to be in one corner, Team USA, and on the other corner, Team World. We're not doing this 4 games in one day, narrated by Kevin Hart nonsense. Don't just take the format you had last year and apply it to this year, except every team is a specific country. Because even the 4 nations face-off, if you recall, it was not one day where they're fitting in all these mini hockey games. They actually played a full hockey game over the course of weeks. They played multiple full games. NBA All-Star one day. So one game, 4 quarters, Team USA versus Team World. Not USA versus Serbia, not USA versus Germany, USA versus Canada. Take the best international stars and pit them against the best USA stars. And it's more practical that way too, because if you think back to the Olympics, there's a lot of players on like Nikola Jokic's team that aren't in the NBA right now. So how could Serbia even have a team? Well, could you do Team Europe? And then you do a Team Canada, and you would have SGA, Jamal, Lou Dort. But you just water down the product too much there. Like just Team World versus Team USA. But part of, I think, the NBA's apprehension about that idea in the past has been, I think Team USA would get smoked. I mean, really look at it. Bogdanovich and Nikola Jokic had Team USA on the ropes in the Olympics. And Jokic didn't even play that well in that game. So now, instead of it being Nikola Jokic with Bogdan Bogdanovic and a bunch of guys that are playing in Europe. You now have Jokic. Here's just the starting five of Team World. Probably. We have to see who emerges and who's deserving and all that. It would be the reigning MVP in SGA. It would be Luka Doncic. It would be Giannis Antetokounmpo. It would be Victor Wembanyama and Nikola Jokic. And the starting five for Team USA, because I think there will still be a fan vote involved, would probably be Steph, Ant, LeBron, KD, and Anthony Davis. I think that's been the apprehension of the NBA, is that even though they're a global game and they very much like to market to the world, USA is their home base. And it would not, I don't think they would love it. And I don't think the face of their league, LeBron James, would love it if it was Team USA versus Team World. And you saw a little bit of that in the format they had last year. The size that Team World would have. Now, they would have less depth. You could build a deeper all-star roster with Team USA than you could Team World. But the top-tier talent, I mean, you're talking about between just Jokic, SGA, and Giannis, you're talking about 6 MVPs. And then you add Luka, and then you add Wemby. So does Adam Silver do something to, in his mind, level the playing field? We'll see. But if it's Team World versus Team USA, and look, it's just like the Olympics, right? Nikola Jokic, it's difficult for people because he's so beloved around here. But, like, we rooted for Team USA. We didn't love everybody on Team USA, Joel Embiid, but we were happy that Team USA won the gold. And when it's Team USA versus the world, I think most people are like, Team USA. Go USA. That's where LeBron and not Embiid, there's no saving him, but LeBron and KD, if there are Nuggets fans that don't love him, or like, that's where they become more likable. How great was it to watch LeBron and Steph be that good on the world stage in the Olympics? But that's the best format. I'm going to be locked into that thing. I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Team USA versus Team World. Does Jamal Murray become an all-star if it's Team USA versus Team World? Because I said the other day that under any format this year, Jamal Murray should become an all-star. Enough of this stuff of him not being an all-star. He needs to become an all-star. I think under this format, he absolutely would be an all-star. If he comes back to training camp healthy and in shape, there's no reason why he wouldn't be deserving of an all-star nod, especially now that it's going to be Team World versus Team USA. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the Broncos maybe not quite done with assembling their roster for the upcoming season. So the Denver Broncos, who already in the eyes of many who cover the league have one of at least the 10 best rosters in the NFL, still though with some weaknesses, right? We know this, that the Broncos roster, as good as it is, and it is very good, it is the best that they've had since they won a Super Bowl. The wide receiver room and the running back room have some questions in it. Maybe one of those rooms is getting addressed. Multiple reports from, I think most notably, Tom Pelissero. I think he broke the news that J.K. Dobbins is going to have a little meet and greet with Sean Payton. They're going to break some bread, and they're going to see if there is a fit with J.K. Dobbins with the Denver Broncos. Now, this is not a new name. J.K. Dobbins has been linked to the Broncos this entire offseason. But it's interesting that J.K. Dobbins is now coming in for a meeting with Peyton after the Broncos drafted R.J. Harvey. Now, Sean Payton had promised that they were going to address the running back room in multiple ways. But then they went out and got R.J. Harvey. Some of that J.K. Dobbins veteran running back stuff kind of died down a little bit. So J.K. Dobbins on the Broncos. This season that he had with L.A. was the best he's had since his rookie year. Since he came in with the Ravens. His first year, he was very good. But of course, injuries have hampered his career greatly. But last year, played more games than he had since his rookie year, ran the ball more, had as many touchdowns as he had in his rookie year. Like every metric that you have, every stat that you have says that J.K. Dobbins was his best since his rookie year this year, playing for Jim Harbaugh. And just looking at it, J.K. Dobbins, if I were to place him on a depth chart, he'd be number one. He'd be the best running back that the Denver Broncos have. But we know it isn't necessarily about just getting the best player available, as the draft has been a reminder of with the Denver Broncos. They felt they didn't need a Marion Hampton. They wanted what R.J. Harvey brought to the table. So the fact that J.K. Dobbins would be the best running back that the Broncos have, at least the running back with the best track record. I mean, you can't argue with that. But I think he'd still be the best running back the Broncos have. But what is he bringing to the party here? Because Sean Payton wants to utilize the strengths of these running backs, the specific skill sets that they have. Well, pass blocking is something that J.K. Dobbins has been known to do. So that could be that. I do think that Sean Payton believes that there is a path forward for R.J. Harvey and Audric Estime to be productive running backs in his system. Okay, I know that he believes that. To me, J.K. Dobbins represents an insurance policy. Because we saw Audric Estime last year. In flashes, I actually thought he was very good, but he couldn't get onto the field. I think bringing in J.K. Dobbins is an insurance policy that if maybe R.J. Harvey follows kind of the same path as some of these rookies like an Audric Estime, where at times it flashes, but for the most part, just can't really find a role. There's a guy that was productive as recently as last year that you can put in there and say, we have every intention of giving Audric Estime chances to get more carries. We believe in RJ Harvey. We want to get him onto the field. But just in case these guys don't earn their way out onto the field, there's J.K. Dobbins. So I would be in favor of this acquisition. I think this would be a wise idea because what the Denver Broncos cannot afford in a year where it's going to be more difficult for them, the target is going to be more on their back than it was. They're not going to sneak up on anybody. People respect Bo Nix. It's going to be difficult for Bo Nix to navigate an NFL season the second time around with all the tape that's out there on him. You get the best players you can get to try and help him. I don't think that they did that to the best of their ability in the draft. Although I understand what Sean Payton was doing, I don't know that I 1,000% agree with it. This would be just, there's a guy walking around on the street that would be better than anybody we have. We're just going to bring him in. And to me, it would be a no risk, high reward type signing, right? You bring in J.K. Dobbins. If you bury him on the depth chart because Audric Estime and RJ Harvey are everything you hoped and dreamed they would be, then you haven't lost anything. Maybe you have a slightly disgruntled J.K. Dobbins, but after what happened with Russell Wilson, I don't think any level of disgruntled employee can bother Sean Payton. With all that circus, he seemed to be just fine with it. I think that you can even sit down with J.K. Dobbins. We're at the point now of the offseason cycle, like the music has stopped and J.K. Dobbins doesn't have a chair to sit in. So Sean Payton could sit there at that dinner and be brutally honest. Like, I believe in these young guys. And if they progress the way I hope they will, or I think they will, we're not going to have a lot of carries for you. But you can also tell them that, look, you're a veteran. You're coming in with a level of trust that these other guys don't have. And if they don't quite develop, if they don't quite do what is necessary, then I know what I'm getting with you, J.K. Dobbins, and I'll get you your carries. I have a hard time seeing the downside unless you're such a believer in Audric Estime that you would think somehow this would be detrimental to his development. RJ Harvey, this is not in competition of RJ Harvey. But Audric Estime drafted later in the draft, maybe some of the same skills that J.K. Dobbins brings to the table. It could be somewhat threatening to his development, but I think Sean Payton has made it very clear that he will do everything he can to get Audric Estime going. I don't see the downside of this. I don't see the real risk. Now, it has to be said, the fact that J.K. Dobbins is still a free agent and the Chargers got that level of production out of him and said, yeah, we don't need you anymore. Let's temper the expectation on what J.K. Dobbins will be. Let's just say what he was last year, he will not be with the Denver Broncos. But can he be a notch lower? Can he be somewhat comparable? Chargers didn't use him as any kind of a bell cow back either. The Broncos are still going to need McLaughlin or Estime or RJ Harvey to do something. They're not going to be able to just lean on J.K. Dobbins. Jim Harbaugh didn't just lean on J.K. Dobbins. But as long as the expectations are that J.K. Dobbins would come into a very young running back room, and with the Broncos in the business of making the playoffs now, maybe they can't mess around as much with development, and they need to win football games, and J.K. Dobbins on however many carries on a Sunday can help them win football games while still being able to give a look to RJ Harvey and Audric Estime. I think Sean Payton could do it. It's just about setting expectation. J.K. Dobbins is not coming in here and being the Terrell Davis to Bo Nix's John Elway. They still have a plan for the young guys. But just in case the young guys don't quite progress, you're going to have a guy that you can hand the ball to and at least have some semblance of hope that you can generate yards to not put Bo Nix in eventually third down and long situations. I think this is a no-brainer. And we'll see what comes of this. Again, they're just meeting. Nothing's signed, nothing's been offered. But to me, this makes a ton of sense to bring him in. Low risk, high reward, maybe not high reward, but there's some reward in it. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Coming up next, last time I checked, David Adelman still needs some assistant coaches on his roster, and there's a pretty good NBA coach who just got fired. Could there be a connection? Could there be a fit in Denver? We'll talk about it next. Broncos whining and dining. J.K. Dobbins, last of the L.A. Chargers to perhaps bolster their running back room. I don't see the harm in it. I don't. I think that room could use a veteran presence. And the inconsistency of the run game, the inability for Sean Payton to truly trust any member of that running back room last year, I think you would have a little bit more faith in somebody like J.K. Dobbins, as long as you're not, using him too much, which I don't think Sean Payton is, because I still think he wants to see what he has in Audric Estime, and I think he believes greatly in what he has with R.J. Harvey. So to me, I don't know that there's any downside. Now, I did mention, I think that's what this text is in reference to, I did mention that the Broncos are in the business of going to the playoffs. And to me, upgrading, it's the same thought process when they got Jahdae Barron in the first round. Like, if there's a player that is definitely better than what you have at that position, then you take that guy. My quarrel was what the Broncos did in rounds 2 through the rest of them. I loved what they did in the first round. I thought that's the way they got to look at it. They don't have any glaring holes. You could quarrel with their wide receiver room and their running back room, but they're not awful in anything. And you get a guy like Jahdae Barron. That's what teams that are in the business of getting to the playoffs do. They get the best player available and they figure out the rest later. As long as you have a quarterback. Got to throw that in. Got to get the quarterback. And then all of this other stuff makes sense. From the 719, they, being the Broncos, made the playoffs because of a very soft schedule. This schedule is a little bit more difficult. I think you could say that. I really think the difference is negligible. I really do. I mean, how much more difficult is this schedule? I mean, it's a third place schedule. I don't see a huge difference. I don't look at this year's list of teams and go, oh, that's so much harder. And I know you're not saying it's so much harder. I think more than the schedule, I just think it's the fact that now Bo Nix is a known commodity. And to Bo Nix's credit, he's now a respected commodity. Defensive coordinators are going to be scheming a little bit more than they did last year. It's not going to be, and we saw this a little bit towards the end of last year, certainly. And certainly the Buffalo Bills schemed for Bo Nix. In the playoffs, you can't leave anything to chance. I thought, especially early on, Bo Nix was facing a lot of vanilla-ish defenses. Now, because of his success, people are going to go, well, we got to deal with the Broncos. They're coached by Sean Payton. Bo Nix looked good in his first year. We know it's going to be difficult to put up a lot of points on the defense, so we got to make our hay and keep them off the scoreboard. That's where I think if you have doubts about the Broncos' ability to get to the playoffs, and when the schedule came out, I said this is a 9-win team, which in most seasons doesn't cut it. That's where I think they are. I think they're a playoff bubble team. And I think they are going to win 9 games, which is not as many as they won last year. So I'm with you on that. But I think more the reason why would be because of Bo Nix's second trip around the block, so to speak, the history of rookie quarterbacks that even after a good first season take a little bit of a step back in year 2. But even with all that being said, this is still a team that expects to get to the playoffs. I mean, the goal, the standard, the expectation, in that organization is not any different. I don't believe they're a playoff team either. But once you make the playoffs, that's kind of what you're supposed to do the next year. Oh, that's their goal. Well, they have higher goals. Well, what am I even talking about? They're not talking about their goals in the building. They're talking about winning the division. Sean Payton made that abundantly clear. He knows exactly what he needs to do to beat the Chiefs. And if they are able to beat the Chiefs, then why shouldn't they win the AFC West? That's where the expectation is in the organization. I think most people outside of it would look and say it's reasonable to put the goalpost or the bar at playoffs. And I would too. I don't think they'll reach it. But that should be what they're striving for. But in the organization, they're striving for even more. And that I really can't get on board with. How much does J.K. Dobbins help that? 719-247-1313. So the shock of the firing of Tom Thibodeau still reverberating around the NBA world. And I'll go back to what I said yesterday. We can't make the mistake of thinking that because a team that has long been unsuccessful, we can't think that just because they become successful that they are less of a mess than they have been. Things happen. The Rockies went to the World Series one year. Like, that's the best example that I can bring. Things happen. Okay? Sustaining success is what good organizations do. Bad organizations have a short run of success all the time. And then they regress to the mean. So I see a lot of people trying to figure out why the New York Knicks did this. Well, they're following a trend. You know, Michael Malone gets fired and Taylor Jenkins gets fired, and it's about relationship. No. Set the Knicks aside. Put them in their own category. They are just a bad organization that makes bad decisions. They're not following any trends. They're certainly not ahead of any curves. They are the Knicks. They are run by James Dolan, who, do not forget, just fired another pretty successful coach from his hockey team. If a team has success for the first time in a long time, and one of the big reasons why they didn't have success was their owner, you just can't make the mistake of thinking that the owner has learned the error of his ways. And I think that's what the lesson here is. The Knicks will be the Knicks. James Dolan will make James Dolan decisions. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't try to fit it in with any other, movement of the NBA landscape. A historically bad organization made a historically bad decision. That's what happened. But that doesn't mean that another team can't benefit from the stupidity of the New York Knicks. Like, for instance, the Denver Nuggets. Tom Thibodeau as an assistant. Who says no? I was thinking about this. What the Nuggets need with David Adelman is a defensive coordinator, if you will. Right? David Adelman, more of an offensive mind. He wasn't really able to implement his systems and on the offensive side. We're going to see more of that this year. How much more of his attention will be devoted to that? To have somebody who has a proven track record of raising the level of his teams defensively would be a great addition to the Nuggets staff. The only things that I was thinking about that might end up being no's to Tom Thibodeau joining the Denver Nuggets. Is that coaching situation with the Nuggets strong enough to bring in somebody like Tibbs? And here's what I mean by that. This idea of David Adelman being a first-time head coach and the guy effectively one seed over has taken 3 different franchises deep in the NBA playoffs. Unequivocally, one of the best coaches in the sport of basketball is sitting right next to David Adelman. I think you liked what you saw from David Adelman, but are you 1,000% sold on him? Like, you could get behind the hire. You could say, you know what? He does deserve to get hired. But does that mean he deserves to be a Nuggets coach for life? No, he's got to prove more than taking, coaching a team that took OKC to Game 7. Right? It's a championship standard. And if David Adelman falls below that and Tom Thibodeau is sitting right next to him, I know that Tibbs hasn't won a title, but what's going to be brought up with David Adelman? Well, too inexperienced. And I'm not even saying that would be a good idea, because going back to what I was talking about yesterday with Michael Malone and how bad of an idea I think it would be for the Knicks to follow up Tom Thibodeau with Michael Malone, the same logic would apply. I would not be somebody saying that at the first sign of struggle from David Adelman that they should be hiring Tibbs, because Tibbs brings the same things to the table that the Denver Nuggets said we don't want anymore. And maybe that's the reason why they don't want him as an assistant either, but you have less power as an assistant. But the distraction of many people looking over at a more proven head coach sitting right next to this essentially rookie head coach, do the Nuggets want that at this stage? So that's one from the Nuggets side, maybe why they would say no. Or maybe it would just be as simple as the players would go, we don't want this guy wearing us out at practices. But then on the Tibbs' side, I don't know, he's not a TV guy. So, although I didn't think Michael Malone would be, and he not only got on TV, he's been very good on TV. If Tibbs wants to coach, he's not going to get a head coaching gig. And being on the staff of the team with Nikola Jokic, I mean, that's got to be. So if Tibbs wants to coach this year, I don't know why he would pick somebody else besides Denver, unless he has a close personal relationship with somebody else that he's going to go coach with them. But I mean, at the very least, David Adelman's got to think about this, right? I know that multiple assistant coaches were probably let go because they brought some of that sandpaper that Michael Malone brought. So maybe there would be that kind of a worry, but perhaps you go in with expectations of, look, you're just the defensive coordinator here. Okay, I set the tone for how hard practices are. I'm setting the rotation, who plays in the game, all that kind of stuff. You're just scheming. I think it could work if the Nuggets feel like their situation at head coach is stable enough to overcome the inevitable first 3-game slide of next year a column coming out in one of the papers of record in this state saying they should fire David Adelman and move Tom Thibodeau over. The distraction that would cause. Do they want that potential distraction? I think they could set expectations. Tibbs could be nothing but a positive. Tibbs on the Nuggets staff. What do you think? 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll get back to the stories that are driving the show. Break up the Rockies. Avalanche aren't breaking up. And finally, Adam Silver coming to his senses. Hello there. Welcome in third hour of this Wednesday edition of the show. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or listening on the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. Got you till 5:45, at which point Game 1 of the Women's College World Series will hit the airwaves, but that is still plenty of time for us to accomplish whatever we are setting out to accomplish. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to call or text in. The invitation still applies to get in here about what player from your team's past would you want to bring into your team's present? Either just because you miss watching them, you never got to see them, or because you think they would be the missing piece to your favorite team's next championship run. So open that up. Get back to that as we move throughout the program. The Stanley Cup Final begins tonight. Eagerly anticipated. We had to anticipate for far too long. The scheduling of the start of these finals, whether it be in the NHL or the NBA, is technical term stupid. It's killed a lot of the momentum, but now that we're on game day and it's game one, Panthers, Oilers, I'm pretty geeked about it, and I have some thoughts on this series that I will share with you coming up in a little bit. But first, the three stories that are driving the show. All right, story number one is that the Avalanche are truly running it back next season.
Coyle cross ice shot, score! Nelson. A seam pass that connects to Brock Nelson, and it's a two-man advantage goal. Kings lead cut in half, 2-1.
Kings television on the call. Why? Because I couldn't find Brock Nelson Avs highlights, and that's not a commentary on Brock Nelson's time. It was short. So, and some of the calls weren't on altitude. They were on others. So there you go, Kings TV. But the story is Brock Nelson. Before we even get to the offseason, Brock Nelson and the Avalanche, more accurately, the Avalanche, get their biggest, most important piece of offseason work done by signing Brock Nelson to a 3-year extension that will pay him on average $7.5 million a year. That is not a bargain price. That is not a hometown discount. But when you are a team that had a legit second line center to fortify your top six, and he leaves, and you go through the number of players that the Avalanche have, that you give up the number of assets to finally get back to a guy that you can really buy into, fortifying your top six once again, you need to pay him. So perhaps this is a lesson learned from letting Nazem Kadri walk out the front door. You could chalk it up to that if you wish. I look at it and say, if the Avalanche were to let Brock Nelson walk out that door, his price was only going to go up, and it would be even more difficult, and they probably aren't going to be getting Sam Bennett. So what would the Avs do? Elevate Charlie Coyle? Jack Drury? No. This was necessary. They needed to sign Brock Nelson. And part of trading Mikko Rantanen was that you opened up more space. So use that space to bring back Brock Nelson. And they did, to their credit. And now we can really see this experiment. Right? Because there's nothing that you have seen where you can say Chris McFarland was 100% right in trading Mikko Rantanen. I don't care what he did in the Western Conference Final. I don't care what the Avalanche have on paper. We don't know that Chris McFarland made the right call unless we see this team in its entirety or in its totality for the entirety of next season. We were never going to get a true sense of Chris McFarland's vision and if it's going to work in a half of a season. So now, not only, and we forget about this sometimes, not only did they lose Nazem Kadri after they won the Cup, they lost Gabriel Landeskog. And now you have Brock Nelson and Gabriel Landeskog back, and you have a legitimate top six. You have Lehkonen, McKinnon, Natchez, Nelson, Nichushkin, and Landeskog. You look at the two teams playing tonight. They're they have great depth, and that's important, but it only works if your top 6 produces for you. And you see with Florida and Edmonton, their top 6s are really good. The Avalanche need that, and then we can get into the depth stuff. But now we'll really get to see whether Chris McFarland made the right call. Because you have Brock Nelson back, you have Gabriel Landeskog back, Valeri Nichushkin is not going to start the season in the player's assistance program. And with these moves that are made, the fact that all these guys are healthy and locked up, at least for next season, that removes all excuses from this team. This team on paper should get out of the West, with all due respect to the 2-time reigning Western Conference champions. If Chris McFarland made the right bet, the Colorado Avalanche should be playing in the playing in the Stanley Cup final. Because yes, the Avalanche, and we'll get into it in the coming days, the Avalanche aren't done. Like, they're going to have to do some financial finagling. They may have to bring in a player or two. We'll see. But this was the biggest piece of business. And this is really who, if you're going to say that the difference between the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers is a 4th-line winger, then I can't have that conversation with you. Okay? It's not that. All right? The Avs right now, as currently constructed, in their top 6, with the best defensemen in the world, the depth they have down the middle at the center position, the goaltending room that they have everything they need to get back to the Stanley Cup final. So they should just do that. And if they don't, then that's really when the judgment will come in about the Mikko Rantanen trade, about investing in Valeri Nichushkin as opposed to some of the other players the Avalanche could have invested in, all that kind of stuff. But it's all made possible by bringing back Brock Nelson, because if you don't bring him back, then everything's all over the place. Then it's like, well, now what are you going to do at second line center? You have a hole in your top 6, and now you're compensating Charlie Coyle pretty well to be your 3rd-line center, and you don't have a 4th line. And now you're just looking at Natchez versus Rantanen. You're like, Rantanen's better than Natchez, so why did they make that deal? Everything falls apart without Brock Nelson. So this was an item of business that had to get done. To Chris McFarland's credit, he got it done, and now we are entering a season that is truly championship or bust with no excuses. A season that is definitely not championship or bust. Definitely the second one. Here's story number 2.
2-2. And it should be an easy play for McMahon. It is.
Yes.
The Rockies win it 3-2. They have swept the Marlins in Miami for the first time since 2006. Kinley with his 2nd save of the year. The last time the Rockies had a sweep on the road was last May in San Diego.
Major League Baseball, that audio courtesy of the Rockies. What is going on? From 9-50 to 12-50, a 3-game sweep. And I don't even care that's the Marlins. I really don't. Because, trust me, 3 days ago, no one was expecting the Rockies to take more than a game from any team in Major League Baseball. They had not won a series since September. They had not swept a series for longer than that. They had not won 3 games in a row since September 15th. Okay? It is shocking. I don't care who the Rockies are playing. It is objectively shocking that they were able to sweep a series. But it is apropos that they achieve the highest heights that they will achieve all year in front of the smallest crowds that they will play in front of all year. 5,800 to 6,800 fans was the day-to-day attendance. Nobody watched this team. And they're not going to do anything like this the rest of the season, I don't think. I think this was their World Series, and they swept it. Good for them. Hunter Goodman was unbelievable in this series. 2 home runs on Monday, the game-winning home run, or what proved to be the game-winning home run last night, and hits an RBI triple in the first inning to get the Rockies on the board. Good for the players. Good for the manager, Warren Schaefer. Good for the Rockies social media team. You may laugh when you see last night that the Rockies social media team tweeted out in all caps, Rockies have won the series. They know they're a punchline. You know what? They're going to try to just extract a little bit of joy from all of this terrible season that they're having. Let them have it. It's fine. I'm glad for the players. It's got to be tough showing up to the ballpark every day knowing that you are at a great disadvantage, that something will go wrong, that you will almost inevitably lose. Good for them for pulling through and having a 3-game sweep. But make no mistake about it. Most people here in Colorado want the Rockies to continue to lose. Not because they have a vendetta against any player on that roster or Warren Schaefer, the interim manager. Their vendetta is very clear. And whether you just are saying if you're going to play terrible baseball, you might as well be historically bad, or you think that maybe having the worst season in the history of baseball will finally wake up Dick Monfort. I'm not going to talk you out of those beliefs, but the fact remains that they need to keep losing in order for any of that to even potentially happen. So while the Rockies may be celebrating, I think there's a lot of people who follow the Rockies that are going, kind of wish that the series was reversed. And it sucks. And it's nothing against the players. It's really not. They're all very likable people. It's about their boss. But for one shining moment, the Colorado Rockies have more wins than Scotty Scheffler. That was another tweet. Good on the Rockies social media team. It's got to be a tough gig. Enjoy it. Rockies sweep the Miami Marlins. And now to story number 3.
Next season, we'll be smack in the middle of the Winter Olympics. So in fact, the game will be on NBC, and the very day we're on, the lead-in will be Winter Olympic events, and then coming out of the All-Star game, which is now going to be in the afternoon instead of the evening, there'll be more Olympic events. So what better time to feature some form of USA against the world?
That is NBA Commissioner Adam Silver this morning on Fox Sports 1. And it makes all the sense in the world, doesn't it? And I guess a special shout out to NBC, because without them having the NBA rights, perhaps this day would have never come. The day where Adam Silver finally realizes that the only all-star format that works is when you can slap an American flag on some of your players and pit them against the rest of the world. That's the only thing that works anymore. We saw in the Four Nations face-off. We saw it in the World Baseball Classic. This is what moves the needle. It gets people interested. It gets players motivated. It is worth discussing, worth watching. It's the only way. And they dabbled in it last year, but the execution was so poor and Kevin Hart was so annoying that it didn't land. But if they just, now there's a right way to do this, even within this. You only have a day. So you can't quite recapture what the Four Nations face-off did. Right? Which was basically a mini Olympic is basically what they did. You can't do that. So don't try to fit 4 games into one day. Don't try to do that. Team USA versus Team World, 4 quarters, 48 minutes. That is the way to go. That will draw numbers. That will get people excited. And that will get you what the NBA has been lacking for a very long time. And that is a compelling all-star game format. Now, Team USA really better bring their A game, because on paper, this looks like an absolute walkover from Team USA. Over Team USA, I should say. Just the starting fives. I'm already predicting the starting fives. We could go deeper if you want, but just the starting fives. Most likely will be Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis. Most likely, right? On the other side, the starting five will be the reigning MVP, the 3-time MVP, a once back-to-back MVP, one of the fastest rising stars in the league, and Victor Wembanyama, and Luka Doncic. SGA, Luka, Giannis, Wemby, and Jokic against Steph, Ant, LeBron, KD, and Anthony Davis. I think this is why the NBA has hesitated to embrace this format. Because even though they are a global game, they like to market to the world. They love the fact that they have so many great players coming in from other countries. Their home base is still the United States of America. In pitting Team USA versus Team World looks like a mismatch. And it may turn out that Team World rolls over Team USA. I don't care. I really don't. Not that I'm rooting against Team USA in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is you just do the best you can. You put the best format out there and you hope the result follows it up, and you get a good result, or you get a compelling game. I don't know if it's going to be a compelling game, but I'm going to be locked into that thing, and I'm going to be talking about it leading up to the All-Star game. This is the absolute right format. Maybe invest a little bit in the next wave of American stars rather than going back to the Steph, LeBron, KD well next year. Maybe elevate Halliburton and Jaylen Brown and Jalen Brunson, Paulo Banchero. Maybe feature those guys instead of a year older KD, LeBron, and Steph. Just an idea. We'll discuss more as we get closer, but this is the best format. It has to be international competition. NHL figured it out. Baseball, they still have their midsummer classic, but at least they do the World Baseball Classic. This is the right way to go. Good job, Adam Silver, and thank you, NBC, for making all of this possible. 719-247-1313 if you want to weigh in on the 3 stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, the Stanley Cup Final tonight. Edmonton in Florida. Why the rematch will be even better than the original. Rich texts in and says, Rockies can't even lose correctly. Even when they succeed, they're actually failing, aren't they? We all want them to keep losing. And they're like, no, we're going to just randomly sweep the Miami Marlins. By the way, they are now only 18 games back of fourth place Arizona. So, yeah, watch out, D-backs. Rockies are hot on your heels. You know, I was thinking about this. Remember, what year was it? So there was one year where the Royals got, in 2015, they ended up with 4 starters in the All-Star game. Not all of them. Salvador Perez was probably deserving catcher. It's a weak position. Salvi has been long one of the best catchers in the league, so that wasn't a big deal. But there's one point that 8 Royals were leading their voting at their respective positions. What made me think of this is the Rockies just tweeted out that All-Star game voting is open. Wouldn't it be awesome if people just stuffed the ballot box for the Rockies? Now, it's not going to win the day, right? Because even with as rabid a fan base as the Kansas City Royals have, and even with some ancillary votes that Royals players would get because they were actually one of the more deserving players at their positions, it would take a lot. It would be as easy to do as organizing a boycott of the Rockies, right? Which is never going to happen. But all I would love to see is just at one point when the voting numbers, you know, they every once in a while they release the numbers, like just one to have like all Rockies and just see people like panic. Wouldn't that be amazing? And what I'm doing is I'm telling you to vote. I am only one man. I have 2 children and they're out of school, so that's how they will spend their entirety of the rest of their summer, or at least until July, so it's not even the whole summer, so stop judging me. But they're going to just keep voting on Rockies. I'm going to do my day-to-day work stuff. Once in a while I'll vote. But let's do this. Let's make this the most successful voting drive campaign in the history of voting. Just one. We don't have to even get to the finish line because I don't want to ruin people's All-Star game by having a bunch of Rockies in there. I just want one check of the vote and there be 8 Rockies leading the voting at their respective positions in the National League. That would be amazing. The problem is it would be very hard to find them because people don't even recognize the names. You would have to make sure that they can see what team it is. Because you know how sometimes in all-star voting, it's like, oh, I know that name. Like maybe it's a position that you don't know as well, but you just like a name jogs your memory and you're like, yeah, I'll vote for that guy. I've heard of him. The Rockies don't have that advantage. You know, Charlie Blackmon used to be that. Like people were like, I know Charlie Blackmon. I'll vote for him. That would be amazing. That people just voted for Colorado Rockies to start the All-Star game. It'd be so good. Oh, yes. So, top of the hour, Stanley Cup final, game 1. And there are 2 reasons why this series, I think, is going to be even more compelling than last year's between the Panthers and the Oilers. One is that both teams are actually better than they were a year ago. And the easy example to look at is Florida with adding Seth Jones and Brad Marchand. But Edmonton's better too. So you have two teams that proved to be the best in their respective conference last year that improved their hockey team. But also, if you remember last year's Stanley Cup final, it actually wasn't that great of a series until the end. It was kind of like watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, most of the movie is really not that good. But you get the twist at the end and you're like, holy cow, because that's what he's really good at. You didn't actually get a compelling series all the way through because Florida buried the Oilers early. And I don't think a lot of people really started to get back engaged in the series until probably it was 3-2. And then it got really good and it ended really good, right? We got to game 7. This has a chance to be really good the whole way. I don't know. I don't think that Florida is going to bury Edmonton. And I also don't think Edmonton can 2 years in a row afford to come back from the dead to force a game 7. I don't think that's in their game plan, and I don't think Chris Knobloch would be wise to coach his team through that path again. I think this has a chance to be a better series start to finish because Edmonton knows they can't afford to start this series the way they did the last one. So two teams, very good last year, improved this year, and I don't think either team is going to jump out to a massive lead. I think this is going to be going back and forth the whole way through. The storylines are obvious, right? Connor McDavid getting his first Stanley Cup is the most compelling storyline of this series. Will unequivocally the greatest or the best player in the NHL right now finally add that to his resume? The legacy of Connor McDavid, I think, is the most compelling storyline. And then you have the Canada of it all. Can they have a Stanley Cup for the first time since 1993? For Florida, going back to back is significant. Obviously, right? To have a back-to-back champion. But then it would be, can they become a dynasty? Because making the Stanley Cup final in 3 years, 3 straight years, only winning one, that's not dynastic. So if they get back-to-back and they've gone to one right before that, and now they're set up next year to potentially become a modern-day NHL dynasty. But for now, trying to go back-to-back, that's significant as well. I think this series is going to be great. I think there are storylines. I think there's star power. The history between the two teams, I don't think is a bad thing. Now, from an X's and O's standpoint, I think this series is going to be won right in the face of Sergei Bobrovsky and Stuart Skinner. The part of the ice where this series is going to be won is right in front of the net. Because you look at these goalies and what they have gone up against so far in the playoffs, they haven't had to deal with a lot of traffic in front of them. Florida playing a team like Toronto, very finesse, very highly skilled. Stuart Skinner has played very well, but he's not. The Edmonton Oilers have not faced a forecheck like the Florida Panthers have, and they are unafraid. As you have seen in previous series, they are unafraid to even step right up to the line and what is allowed when it comes to interfering with a goalie. I think both teams are going to try to crash the net front. I think those battles, who wins more of those, are going to win the series. And I just think Florida's better at that. I think that's in their DNA. They don't have to manufacture it. I think with Edmonton, they have some players that can do that, but it's not who they are. With Florida, it is. So I think as much as I would love to see Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup, the country of Canada to win a Stanley Cup for the first time since 1993. I love all those storylines, and I kind of want to see them happen. Looking at this objectively, I don't see how Florida doesn't win. Now, it's going to be a great series, as I said, but I'm taking Florida. I'm just saying, the way they are built, they are so built for playoff hockey, where other teams kind of have to morph into a playoff hockey team. But I think it's going to be a great series. Great series. Can't wait for 6:00. As I said, that's going to actually do it for the show, because Women's College World Series Game 1, some perhaps alternative programming, if you are so inclined. Texas and Texas Tech. Pregame coverage from Westwood One begins here in about 7 minutes. And then first pitch just after the top of the hour. Appreciate your patronage and your interaction. Back to do it again tomorrow at 3 here on Extra Sports 1300.